Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Babylon 5 Third Age podcast. This is our Halloween special where we are not going to look at Babylon 5 itself because that doesn't have all that many horror-themed episodes. Instead, we thought it would be a special treat to check out Event Horizon, a kind of classic schlocky sci-fi movie that we thought would be fun to give around. And as promised, we have our costumes with us, so I guess to start with, we are going to give a little bit of an introduction with those before we start going into first impressions. So, Meike, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, as you can see, at least those who watched or listened to our last episode, BSE has taken for the worst, and now I'm dead. So I thought, well, it doesn't matter how dead you are, you can still suit up and give Jack Skeleton a run for his money.
I think that worked out pretty well for you, and I've once again dove deep into my closet for old costumes. This one I think is older even than the last one, and it's not very horror themed, but I guess it's from a universe where everything goes horribly wrong. So yeah, I'm in my Battlestar Galactica outfit, and for our last guest, as usual, something is a little bit different, right? Yeah, this is not working. I don't know what that was, but you know what?
Oh, hi.
Just
Hi, Alex.
hi.
How are you doing?
Just get the cable and
Oh.
plug yourself in. Everything as usual, right?
Oh, sure.
Everything completely as usual. So,
Hello.
we brought something special to check out this movie. So, I think all of us have seen Event Horizon now. I've seen it many, many times. How often did you?
Well, I have to say at least once.
At least once. That's a pretty good number. And you, Meike?
I've seen it for the first time again.
Which is beautiful because this is the same constellation we usually have for Babylon 5 as well. So yeah, we made sure to have all this. And the way this works, because, you don't usually watch all of our podcasts.
I was
so you're
pretty
not,
busy.
Exactly, you're not that familiar with it. We usually give like our first impressions in a little small segment, and then we kind of go through the A plot, the B plot, and in this movie, it's just going to be the main story and see like what kind of discussion topics come up. We never have a plan how long these discussions are going to take. Usually they're like twice as long as the stuff that we've watched, so prepare to
Prepared
be
for
here
a
for the next
3-hour
like
long.
4 to 6 hours at very minimum. So yeah, first impressions, and I guess we start as usual. Oh no, we usually do a synopsis first. So does either of you want to do it? Otherwise, I can do my best.
We can read like the equivalent of back of the DVD on IMDb.
I could try and find like the the German version of which is beautiful.
I mean, to summarize, Morpheus from The Matrix is fighting demons in space, which is, I think, a great concept on its own.
Yes, and if we
With
are
the help of Robin Hood, or maybe not the help.
Really?
Robin Hood is also there. Whether or not he's helping is a different matter. And if we are going to believe the German title, it's also all happening at the edge of the universe, which in this case would be Neptune. So this another instance of brilliant translation right there. Okay, but with the synopsis out of the way, let's dive into some first impressions. And I guess our first time watcher will give us the very first impressions that there are.
Again, it's the same procedure every time.
We are getting closer and closer to New Year, so yeah, same procedure as every year is going to keep repeating.
Yeah, well, first impression, well, I dropped in just now, Robin Hood, and yeah, that's when I saw Kevin Costner appearing. It was like, what is Robin Hood doing in space? The second question I had is, wait, does it mean there are dinosaurs appearing in space? Which, gave me quite a funny idea for a movie, but unfortunately, that's not what is happening.
Unfortunately.
Well, I would love to see dinosaurs
I agree.
in space.
That would be a movie that I would be interested in watching, actually, yeah.
Quick question, if I may interrupt. Like, which actor is the Robin Hood? Because I actually didn't notice.
The one who's playing Dr. Weir in this one.
Oh, really? Okay, I had no idea.
So
Until on screen.
yes, I will. Our main, I guess maybe main
Our
antagonist.
main protagonist.
We will have to talk about how well that works out.
Yeah. Well, I have to say I had a rather strong Alien feeling, though I wouldn't count on it because, well, Alien is like, I don't know, one of the very few horror sci-fi, or maybe the one horror sci-fi movie I've seen so far. But yeah, well, I looked it up when the movies came out, and it kind of adds up. It's 1997. This movie came out the last Alien, or the fourth Alien movie came out at the same year. So yeah, the bond there is quite strong. Especially this rowdy group of, I'm not sure, are they official military people? I didn't really get that, but they really feel like those in the second Alien movie, or at least it felt like they were trying to recapture this scene where everyone is waking up from stasis and going a bit rough around the edges. And well, I could have lived without the sexist commenters.
That's an interesting comparison, though, because when we think of Event Horizon when we were watching it, we were immediately comparing it to the first Alien film, and it seems like it was like very highly, not even inspired, but trying to sort of almost remake the concept 20 years later, or however many.
We definitely had the same thought as you, as like there was at least one scene where we thought, okay, this is basically a complete parallel to Alien 1, and also why it didn't work quite as well. But yeah, I think, like, getting into the rowdiness, we'll have to look at Alien 2 as well, because, yeah, the waking up scene there is a little bit different than in the first
But
one.
hear what Meike said about, like, that she wasn't sure if our protagonists were, like, military personnel or not. I'm not sure either.
We had
watched
exactly
this
the
film.
same thought, and we're looking at the ship and, like, what is this, and why are these people chosen to undergo this like rescue
Yes,
operation?
everything about them screams space trackers, just average Joes with like a stalwart captain. But then at the very end, we learn that they have like nuclear tactical missiles on their
Yes.
ship or something. Go on.
The other thing, like, you had the thought, what is Robin Hood doing in space, and that kind of is a dissonance. We were looking at this like with Morpheus in space, and honestly, for the most part, it felt like, yeah, that makes sense that he would be here. Like, the character was so similar that it was kind of, yeah, this is the guy who is good at like keeping calm under like extreme situations.
Yeah,
and-
for me personally, Lawrence Fishburne in this film was the highlight. Like, I loved him in this. And like, we were discussing that I think this was before The Matrix, like before he was famous. I'll quickly Google it, but
yeah, we have to double check.
but this probably implies where like what the types of roles he sort of like skyrocketed on.
Yeah.
So I bet everyone else on this ship would have loved to take one of the pills.
I mean, yeah, the more we go towards the end, the more appealing the whole idea of like entering Zion would have become, I think. If it's the choice between the machines and hell, that would be something. Oh yeah, but it's not that.
Literally 2 years later, Matrix.
But this still surprises me because he looked so young in this film, even compared to Matrix. I feel like.
You can.
Maybe tough 2 years.
Maybe that, or maybe the production of Event Horizon itself wasn't this much of a strain, because we looked a little bit into it, and from the looks of it, it was like a massive cluster.
It was a very troubled film, and that like production of the film, and that explains a lot of why it seems unfocused. And maybe we can, like, we started talking about characters. Maybe you want to just jump into characters, like, in general.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's start with the main discussion sort of at the beginning, and the beginning is like a lot of establishing sort of the characters that we get. And for us, I think when we meet Dr. Weir for the first time and get these like glimpses of Earth and his apartment there, it was almost a little bit like in The Shining, right? This establishing of characters that just feel a little bit off. Like, oh, here's this guy and he misses his wife and he built a shrine to her with like 12 pictures on his little windowsill, and it starts like drifting from the normal, relatable slightly into the uncanny.
Yeah, and it's the first scene of the film. It's the first introduction to one of the characters, right?
So I have to say, sorry. Though I have to say, it didn't feel that strong for me because the apartment is otherwise quite empty. Therefore, it's you don't have much of a contrast to other personal things. It's just the pictures of his wife that is at this point we don't know if she's deceased or if she's lost or whatever. I have to say at that moment I was contemplating if his wife was on the event horizon and therefore lost. But overall, it's just like he just fixated on the one thing that he could take with him and was important, though it doesn't have the weight for me for this shrine-like attitude.
Okay, but you will agree that the first portrayal we see of him is sort of this definitely troubled man, right? Like, and do you get like creepy vibes from him from this first like scene or not?
Creepy, I'm not sure, but certainly weird, because he's waking up and the first thing is that he grabs his photo.
Yes.
And the way he's saying this whole thing, it just feels weird. So no, not creepy, but like please go see a psychiatrist or something.
Yeah, whatever kind of distance there is between him and his wife, whether or not they have been like divorced or she's dead or something, seems like it's been not fully like dealt with. Like there's definitely something that he's holding on to.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because the very next scene is him as sort of this black sheep outsider to a group of space trackers, right? Like he sort of becomes the audience surrogate in this space environment, right? And this is something we don't know as the audience.
Yeah, about Lewis and Clark was the ship named, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, as
Yeah.
our resident like ship guy, I have to say, I'm very glad when the model work in this movie shines through, because we I think commented quite a lot that a lot of the CGI didn't hold up so well, and there were like several scenes where it's like very much you are in a theater and this is a 3D movie and it's like things flying at your face and they don't look that great anymore.
It's the 90s, everyone thinks that 3D is going to be good, never mind what it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really not. But you were saying, Meike.
I forgot what I wanted to say.
It was about
Maybe it'll come back.
him
We
like
were talking
becoming
about
this
characters.
outsider.
Yeah, we were talking about characters before we got distracted, so...
Oh yeah, the when you have this scene transition, there is no transition. It's just bam in your face, and you were saying like that. What did I miss something? It felt quite kind of quite cheap. And on the other hand, the constellation, there I'm again with Alien 2, with oh god, I don't know what the characters were called then, but the constellation, you have this outsider integrated in this obviously well working crew, and yeah, it really felt so Alien 2 to me.
Yeah, and that's you're comparing it to Alien 2 constantly, and I think that's a great comparison because Alien 2, we have this well-oiled crew, and then we have the outsider, but the outsider is Ellen Ripley, who is a civilian, and she went through terrible things, but we as the audience already witnessed them. And the difference is that here we have this Ripley-style character, but he is obviously in some way troubled that we do not understand, and it sort of makes it's sort of a dissonance in some way. Like you are watching the scene with the crew. We are getting all of the to know all these characters. There's Lawrence Fishburne. There's all these other people who are definitely important. And then as an audience member, like whose perspective am I supposed to follow? Right. This was our like main sort of discussion that we had. I don't know if you had a similar feeling.
Yeah, he is. It's not like he's present in the sense of a main character, like a protagonist.
Yeah.
He's a bit lost there. He's introduced like more like a shimmy background character at the beginning, who is, I have to think like crime series where you see the victim in the very first scene.
Yes.
It feels like this, but the protagonist feels like to be more. I think Miller was the character's captain's name.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that like nothing in the first third or half of the film shows you that Miller, Lawrence Fishburne, is supposed to be the protagonist.
It's odd.
It's only like the more it reaches the end, the more you're like, oh, so this is like the main guy, sort of. And like a movie doesn't need a protagonist. Just let's make it clear. But if everything in the direction sort of implies that we're meant to, we're in space. The audience doesn't know how space works. That's why in Alien 1 we have these space trackers. We sort of get to know them, that this is a normal environment with normal people and the crew and so on. And here it feels like there is no sort of, I don't know how to explain this.
I mean, what throws me off, and maybe this helps explain it a little bit, is when we talk about Alien 2, we have of course the black sheep in Ellen Ripley, but we also have like the company representative, right? The insurance guy in the suit that is put on the spaceship, and everybody is kind of like keyed off by him because he is like a representative of Weyland-Yutani. You don't want him here, and he doesn't really have a useful function in the crew. And I think this is what threw me off in this first scene, because I looked at Dr. Weir, and he kind of felt like that,
He's
this
the
odd one out.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's also introduced, this is Dr. Weir. You immediately pointed this out. He's not just a company representative, he is somebody more important, and then the more we learn about him, he's actually very crucial to what they're trying to achieve on the ship, because he's the guy who knows the vessel that they're going to. He's the guy that's going to be a key. And for me, this was kind of like a dissonance, because the entire dynamic feels so evocative of what I'm familiar with something like the Alien franchise, but then the roles are not quite lining up, and then at least for me, the dynamics also start breaking down, because everybody in this crew is like very, very hostile towards him, and at some point I'm just like, why? Like, you don't have an immediate reason to be this harshly against this guy. We learn, oh, this crew was supposed to have like leave, they were on their way to holiday and get recalled. Okay, but that's not Dr. Weir's fault. Like, this is.
But on the other hand, we've seen Dr. Weir as a creepy weirdo, and the reason why this is a problem is like in the first this third of the film or so, we do not know who to get emotionally invested into. Basically,
I think,
that's sort of the way to put it.
I mean, what I actually liked is that because there was no really protagonist feeling for the most of the movie, you had this underlining, okay, you don't know who will die.
That is true.
Because I have to, the few horror movie or horror games I know of, you have this underlying feeling, okay, this person is surely going to die first or second, because just how they are represented. And here we don't have that. Here it's more like, okay, who is really the one going to die first or next? It's a bit hard to see.
Yeah, and this is a good thing, right? Like, we kept like guessing, and also this film is very good in the terms of horror, like dealing with death, because for I think like 2/3 of the film nobody dies. We even get like active and successful attempts at saving lives, and this is in a typical slasher or something where, as Meike is saying, it's like, oh, this guy is gonna die, and then he dies, and like, wow, I am so surprised by that.
Yes.
And we actually had like 1 or 2 instances where we were having exactly this reaction of, oh yeah, this is definitely the end then, and actually like somebody managed to pull through. Like we had the scene of like Captain Miller like actually successfully rescuing somebody as like the ship is blowing out, like pulling her through
like
the
the
airlock.
lady at the very
Yeah, and she makes it. So
the young guy that was like taken over by demons and so on, they've been looking after him throughout the entire film, and spoiler, he survives the entire film.
he has the absolute worst possible time. He's obviously the candidate to die. He's like the first one making a very stupid decision. He's the first one literally like possessed
He
and
is
horribly
the
injured.
horror movie protagonist that
Yes.
touches the magical artifact.
Yeah,
But at the
where
same
you-
time,
I mean, it's especially this. Oh my God! This is something I don't know. I have to touch it. I have to see what it is
horrible.
with my hands. Oh, gee.
Admittedly,
And also the splitting up. Like in every horror movie. Oh yeah, let's split up. It's certainly it's bulletproof.
Yeah.
Nothing can go wrong with that.
but it's even like, especially it doesn't make sense because even if we ignore the fact that this is a horror film about space demons, these are rescue workers checking out an abandoned ship. Of course you would go in pairs. And like, honestly, if they are military personnel, why don't they have guns? Like, that's actually a good
Yeah.
question.
We were so
That's the
surprised.
next question.
We were so surprised when in the last fourth of the movie, the captain suddenly says like, "Oh, now things are serious," and he starts pulling out a gun, and we're just sitting here. You had this the entire time and didn't use it.
Though it's not a gun, if I understood
it's
it
like a-
right. It's for repairs. For
Yeah, it's like-
Oh,
they're using
it's
it
the
for
same
hull.
thing that Cooper used the entire
it's the same thing that the best character in the film used to repair the ship.
But
Okay,
before we get like to all the things happening on the Event Horizon, maybe let's zoom out a bit because we had like this entire establishment of the characters, and we run into exactly this problem. What kind of vessel is the Lewis and Clark exactly? Because we only learned from Dr. Weir that it's the government sending them out, and I think we all just assume that it's like some kind of American government,
they
I
have
guess.
like big American flags.
But not all of them. There's also, I think, a weird like Australian one. There is like an odd one that has like the Southern Star Cross, but then like what I think is remember like kind of a native flag on there. So it's like an international crew, but they're all like very Western. So I'm assuming it's like some kind of like, you know, NATO in space kind of organization, or like USA in space, like from what it seems. And yeah, there is this exactly thing, like they are sent to the Event Horizon, and I don't really know what to expect from that because they are supposed to be like professional rescue workers. They seem somewhat military, but at the same time they are also like space truckers.
I mean, that's the thing where, you know, technically we shouldn't overthink deep world building in
Yeah,
something
of
like
course.
this. But the thing is, like, you start up Alien and space, literally truckers, but in space, and you don't have to ask questions. But
Yeah.
but here it's like, you know, do they have guns? Why don't they bring the guns if they have guns? It's obviously a dangerous situation and things like this. Did the space Chinese steal Event Horizon?
Yeah, it's kind of the thing. It is established for us that the last time an attempt was made to rescue something this far out, it went horribly wrong and like everybody got lost. And so if I hear that, then I start asking these questions. Why would you split up? Why would you not be aware of the fact that you're basically in a sci-fi horror movie when like the one precedent that you have is an accident where everything went horribly wrong?
Yeah, but I feel like this is where we should stop with horror tropes, however, because apart from all the goofiness, the rest of the horror tropes are a discussion for the later part of the film.
I mean, yeah.
So maybe let's get to the like main cherry on top of the cake of the entire film, to the namesake, to the Event Horizon itself, which is, let's start with the fact it's a beautiful miniature.
It is.
It is super cool. I honestly would like to see it in reality because
I think it was like a very massive model.
I can
too.
imagine they probably made like a massive thing because just the amount of model work and handicrafting, like you can see all the details on it. It looks great.
Yes.
It looks even better in comparison to the terrible CGI. But yeah, and like so the story of the Event Horizon in the movie is that it got like lost, right? Like
Yeah, it was a big testbed vessel, and I think we learned that it was like widely known that the Event Horizon existed, and it was also widely known that it was went missing, which I kind of like. It's not like a secret government project that nobody knew about. Like, no, this was generally known, just nobody knew what kind of like experimental testbed it was, and it had like the mission of getting out there, testing an FTL system that creates like a wormhole, a gateway of sorts, false space. We get like this beautiful explanation of that. And then it disappeared, and the government basically told everybody it exploded instead.
Well, what I didn't understand this text explanation right at the beginning of the movie was technically unnecessary because it doesn't give you anything more. That the Event Horizon, what it is and how it went missing, that would have been like, I don't know, 2 lines in the movie itself, which
That's
would you have
true.
put in the explanation of Dr. Weir. And yeah, well, it's just dead weight. I don't know. I didn't get it. The information. 2015, the first permanent colony on Moon was built. Sorry, no, that's
90s.
unnecessary. So unnecessary. It doesn't give any more flow to the movie.
The only thing we would have lost is the information that we are in the distant future of 2040. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of this film suffers a bit from show don't tell, tell don't show. But and I think, especially with this like intro, there's like this intro text that you're talking about, and I feel this may be caused by the trouble development, because one of the things we read is that this film had a very short editing period. It was extremely rushed, and I feel like that may have been one of the issues there. Like they just didn't really think that through, and they decided to slap that in, and it's honestly kind of pointless. Maybe they wanted to expand the runtime.
In general, it feels like sometimes there were departments in this film that weren't really talking to each other. I feel like this might have also been kind of the case with some of the visual effects work that we see, where there's like really, really beautiful practical effects and then like digital stuff plastered on top of it to the point that it almost takes away. And it just feels like they are not really talking to each other, and then there's too little time to really splice it all together perfectly well, and then it becomes this like kind of imperfect product. Because I imagine like this entire intro text was like created and then put into the edit at a point where nobody knew if the lines that explain all of this later in the story would actually stay in or not. I can easily see that happening.
Okay, in that case, let's carry on with the plot, I'd say.
Yeah, so we get the Lewis and Clark having this very dramatic entrance, actually, where I think we were questioning like kind of what made this entrance so dramatic, like just the docking procedure where like everybody is thinking, oh my god, we're getting closer,
Everything
we're getting closer.
Shaking.
Everything is shaking. We're on this like upper atmosphere of Neptune, and but ultimately like it's a fairly like standard procedure. But this also once again felt like very reminiscent of Alien. This time Alien 1 to me, where like landing the Nostromo on the planet is actually like a pretty dangerous maneuver, because you go into this like very like
landing on
atmosphere.
Nostromo on the planet is a dangerous maneuver, and here it's like they are flying through higher atmosphere and they want to dock with another ship, and everything in the movie tells you that this is a very tense action scene. But I'm sort of like, I don't understand what the threat is, right? Like,
yeah, and you know they approach the vessel and it's coming closer and closer and closer and closer, and then we're close enough, and we just engage retro thrusters and stop.
Yeah,
and it's like this perfectly normal maneuver.
And especially this high anticipate. Oh my gosh, we're coming near. It's so dramatic. Even the counting from the crew is dramatic. And you're like, yeah, if we're too close, then push the brackets. What's the problem?
On the positive side,
there's something.
Yes, exactly. It's like you have it all like monitored. Like you don't have to announce it so dramatically.
They're saying that they're going towards a navigation beacon, so they know exactly where the ship is.
But on the positive side, for me, this kind of creates a situation where the delivery to me like makes it feel the entire time like suddenly like something is going to unnecessarily go horribly wrong, and like even just docking with the ship is suddenly like impales somebody in some like weird way, and then that just doesn't happen, and it is like this normal procedure. So the movie builds tension, and this is why I expect like people to start dying very quickly, and then they just don't. And I don't know how intentional that is, but it is cool in so far that it very quickly feels like, our crew has overcome like a very dangerous obstacle, even though that like really wasn't one.
Maybe it is. Maybe it was meant to like showcase their professionalism and so on.
Yeah.
Maybe we're overthinking.
But it does lead to a very, very cool scene where like we see this like small rescue vessel, and it's right up to the event horizon. The event horizon is like this massive looming thing, and we zoom out into the clouds and just see the size difference between the two, which for me worked really well, because in the beginning they zoom like from the miniature into the room, so we have a good idea what the size difference is between the bridge of the vessel and the rest of the Lewis and Clark, and now we get like an idea of how big the event horizon itself is. And this is, I feel like, very, very cool, because that's hard to do in space and with miniatures, like to give a good sense of scale. Like
It's just the reveal with like the fog, sort of the Neptune fog, sort of like splitting apart and so
Yeah,
on.
it is like a nice thing, and yeah, like you already said, the event horizon is really beautiful, and they have so much done. Like you can tell that this is like this last era of great big miniatures being built, where there's a lot of like self illumination in there, a lot of electronics put in there, and we get like many scenes of the Lewis and Clark like illuminating itself. It's very neat.
Right now, I'm thinking this was a rescue mission. The ship they were trying to rescue had far more people than the people, the crew on the rescue ship. Where, if they were all alive, where the hell would they have stored them?
It's actually a good question.
No, I think the implication was meant to be that they're meant to go there and fix it up. I think
Yeah,
that was the idea.
okay, like-
I think, but it's never clearly stated. Like, as you were saying, like, when we are following this story in the beginning, we think the same thing, that they're just there to, rescue the crew. And only later Dr. Ware says that, oh, we have to, you don't understand, we must, the FTL magical drive, we must, like...
I mean, I guess the idea would have been like worst case scenario, the ship has returned and everything has gone critical, that they would go with a lifeboat plan of like the front of the ship detaching and going that. Like maybe something along those lines.
It's the same issue that we've already discussed here with the entire premise, like where it's supposed to be like a secret government project, but then we don't even know if the protagonists are government employees, and if they are, then why didn't they send like 10 ships? Like a few hundred people, like you would do to a rescue operation
It's
on the other side of the solar system.
It's kind of this conceit of the story where I guess we just have to go along with this idea that something would have been done to that effect.
Yeah, the problem is just that there are so many things you stumble over within the movie where you have this holes of information that just break the whole story, because it's no longer believable in the fictional universe that is supposed to be created there, and that's the problem. Why even if all the rest would have been perfect and super awesome, if you have this plot holes in there, it's unbelievable, and you say that it's crap.
You spend more time asking questions than following the plot.
It's this thing like the world building doesn't need to hold up perfectly, right? But if it's distracting to a point where I start thinking about it, that might become a problem.
And I wonder once again. Oh,
technically, we're going in this movie, like, oh gosh, it's getting to be scary, and then wait a minute, why is this? And what about that? And oh, did I miss just a horror scene just now because you're so in your head with other things?
Yeah, it's like at the last third of the thermal quarter, there is like spoilers when almost everybody already died. We were like, okay, these characters are dead. These are dead. Wait, there's like one character that we don't know what happened to her, and then they just stumble upon her. There's like a lot of just this lack of polish in the plot. That's what I would say.
And this feels very much like it's this editing thing, right? Where
I wonder how much that is.
The pacing is off. Like I imagine, like maybe there was an entire scene of what happened to this character that we were missing for a second, and it just landed on the floor, and so there's just this gap in her story, and it becomes one of these.
But exactly that point. I was watching the movie. And I was, wait a minute. There's this woman. What happened to her?
Yeah, and you start like counting
what
off.
happened to her? Yeah, it was
She's just there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we are getting into these questions, we return what we already talked about very quickly. The immediate trope of we have three people that have entered the vessel and they immediately decide to split off. Our youngest, like, assumingly most inexperienced guy is sent to the most important part of the vessel.
He's the engineer, so I think that's why they did it. But yeah, why
I mean, the main thing is they decide not to take Dr. Weir on board, the guy that knows the ship the best.
Yes, the very first thing is, they say that no, Dr. Weir, you must stay behind, where Dr. Weir is literally the engineer that built it. Like, we later see him, like, manually fix up elements of the ship, so...
It's this thing, like, it shouldn't be necessary for anybody to explain to Justin, the engineer, that you shouldn't touch the open core of the FTL drive. But, you know, if it's going to be necessary, Dr. Weir would have probably been a pretty good candidate to do that and say, oh, oh damn, the gateway is open to wherever the hell this goes, so maybe don't put your thumb in that and definitely not try to reach in.
Can we shortly say something about the design of this core? Because
Oh,
when I
please.
saw this, it kind of I'm not sure why, but the design, um in the cravings in there, it kind of felt like some Mayan relic to me.
Yeah.
It's kind of
That was the
Stargate
first.
inspired, right?
I don't know. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this, with a bit of pseudo-electric stuff around it, a few lights here and there, but especially this ball in the middle of this core, the outer hull of this, it felt so like something you would find in something, made by the Mayans.
And now that you say it, that is interesting because the entire ship is. In every room, we stumble upon like things that are meant to be just, creepy or cool or something. You have this like Mayan weird FTL drive that's like looks like it's made of stone, and there are spikes on the walls, which we were betting the entire film that someone would land on, and nobody did.
Yes.
It's
But just to quickly reiterate, I think I get what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to make their own Giger.
yes. I think this is kind of this idea that, you know, alien movies have such a distinct style for the alien ships, and how do you replicate that without just being a copy? And going this like old route is kind of an interesting thing, which I am actually a pretty big fan of this. I think we already watched Pandorum at some point, right? This like German
yes.
and there is this whole idea that it's organic technology. Like none of it is really alive, none of it is really a technology, but they built all the sets to evoke the idea the ship is alive. The reactor is like a beating heart, and there's like these corridors like veins with tons of cables and stuff through it. And the Event Horizon here feels very much the same way. It's this idea that it all is supposed to be purposeful in universe, including in the core, but it creates this imagery that is very evocative of something like ancient ruins. And we looked behind the scenes, it's also like very inspired by the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So this like clear imagery.
Yeah, but it's sort of a thing. Like Meike here, you say that you look at this reactor room and you think Mayan sort of ruins, and then we look at the med bay with like the weird creepy columns, and this like you think cathedrals or something, and like there is no unified theme to the entire ship, and like maybe that's on purpose, but it's very chaotic almost.
What it definitely creates. Oh, please.
Just a short word to the med bay. When I think it was the captain entering there first, like saying, "Oh, it's a tomb. It's never been used," and the cables coming down from the ceiling, and like, this doesn't look used. Honestly, this looks fresh to me. But hey,
What's the state of the ships that you usually run? What it does create, and there is where I think it might be a bit intentional. The core looks to me very much out of place. Like the materials that are used there are not these like polished metals. It's rough, it's carved. The shapes are a little bit different. To me, it feels like a little bit out of place. And this is something that I can imagine is actually intended, that basically to create this technology, it's almost this like more ritualistic kind of stuff that you employ.
Yeah, but then like Dr. Weir at the end like enters the like these side passages, and he ends up in 1970s Tron corridors.
And this like recorder looks out of place, but in a way where I'm very convinced that is not intentional. Like this is somebody like misreading a note of what they were trying to do, because it's
Maybe.
I think it's a cool set, but I don't know what it does in this movie. Like it's very weird.
yeah, but this ritual part of the core, and I mean it adds up with the Latin that someone is speaking on the recording you hear at the beginning and in the end. It all adds up to this hell representation, which I have to say I had like a rather literature experience there when everything started with our save yourself from hell and this eyes, carved out eyes. I had to think of Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
Because especially I have to admit I read the first part of that because I had it for university. There is a part of Odysseus. Odysseus is also in Dante's Inferno in hell because he ventured too far. He ventures over the known of the what is it called, the
known world.
limitations of
Okay.
the known world, and with that he is going against God, and therefore he is thrown into hell. And it does translate quite well for me to this part because we have the same here with a ship that is supposed to be going over the known universe.
That would have been a cool story. Odysseus invents FTL drive.
Yes.
I mean, but it kind of feels like all this is kind of partly an idea who sparked this movie, but I think there was so much more you could have done with this.
Yes,
Absolutely.
definitely.
I mean, this whole ritual demons thing, and you could have pulled this off so nicely, but it was like, oh yeah, we take a piece of there, and then mix it together, and then we have some sort of sci-fi horror.
Yeah, and honestly, the movie is, the main thing about it is supposed it's demons in space, but we discussed a lot how it really doesn't really feel well in many places, and it feels like, although, do we want to discuss the entire horror occult demon aspect now, or do we want to leave it for the end, because that's sort of the entire climax of the film?
I mean,
Honestly, I'm not sure how much there is to discuss until the end, because there's not much happening before the demons start creeping out.
Well, in that case, we may actually jump to the first thing that is happening, which is, you mentioned Lawrence Fishburne entering the med bay, and oh my god, it's the 1990s, so we get a jump scare in the most classic sense, with
Yes.
a glove that attacks him.
and maybe
I
this
have
is
to admit, I jumped there.
It's
That's
fine.
good. You haven't been exposed to 90s sci-fi as much. so-
Lawrence Fishburne was startled by this, so it's okay if you did.
Yes. which might be a good moment to highlight. Lawrence Fishburne's acting in this movie, I feel like was a great help for the most part. This scene being the one big exception. I didn't feel like him losing control is something that he could emote
He
particularly
never
well.
loses control, so he can't act like it. He does.
Yeah.
I think this glove attacked him, and he was like, "Oh, what the fuck!" It's just what was more comical.
It's like him then also being stuck in a spacesuit, so emoting is just very difficult. So what is very sort of, oh no. But I like that. I think fairly early on we were talking about this, that there, before all of the actual hell horror breaks loose that we're going to talk about later, there is also just the unsettlingness of being on this spaceship that is empty and lost and just an environment that is not suited for humans anymore.
And, what happened to
Exactly,
everyone,
just
right?
the mystery portion of it. And I feel like that apart from, having the obligatory jump scare with the floating thing, still was kind of interesting. Just this idea of trying to decipher the recording, trying to figure out what shape the ship is in. This is what I always like when we get to see sort of the toolbox that also our characters have at their disposal to kind of showcase what they can figure out, what they can do to revive the vessel again and
We
stuff.
have
I have to admit, I really liked. Think the other woman, not the surviving one. Spoiler. The other woman who is on the first round there, checking out everything. When she's like, "Oh, there's a bit of blood there." and then in the background you see the whole wall is plastered with blood. I really like this scene because it was so, yeah, there's a bit of blood, you're right.
Although that immediately brings us to one of the main features of the film, which is very, very massive amounts, not like super newly, but they really enjoyed their body horror when they were making this. They decided to set most of the horror based on this. So, you know, we get a glimpse of the blood behind the woman. I don't even remember this character's name. And there's like skulls, there's like people like torn to shreds and so on. And they really like that aspect.
Definitely. Like, and this is one of these instances where like the practical effects that go into this, the set dressing, are really, really cool, and they definitely want to show it off. I don't know how well it holds up in every instance. Like, this wall, for example, is really cool, but by the 6th scene that we see of this, like, them casually walking around in there, and there's just, like, half people merged into the wall of the vessel, you kind of start thinking, like, don't you guys, like, want to put, up a divider or, like, do anything about this? Like, you've started heating up the vessel, there's atmosphere. Doesn't this, like, start smelling bad at some point? But in this first instance, it looks really cool.
We don't know. At least it was before it was freezing there.
Yeah, so maybe it's like
so.
Okay.
On the other hand, it in like 20 hours defrosting.
On the other hand, like
you can try it with an ounce of meat or minced meat or something. Take it out of the refrigerator and smell after 20 hours.
Although it's one of these minor like things that just, you know, it's sort of making me question a little for a moment the believability of this, because, you know, it's nitpicking, but it's this in hindsight nitpicking, which is we see a body, like a terrible CGI body that is like completely frozen over and jump scares us, but then this like splatters of blood are like perfectly red and condensed and so on in a no oxygen atmosphere and so on after 7 years.
It's odd, but
it's obviously just for the gore.
At the same time, like, for me, it's also on this level where I look at this and think, this is what makes the sci-fi schlock. Like, this is not trying to be gritty and realistic.
Let's make something clear. We enjoyed this film.
Absolutely. Like, I enjoy seeing these, like, half-merged skulls in the background.
The reasons why we enjoy this film are at the end of the film, primarily, but yes.
But you, Mike, you brought out your library, so please.
What is this?
I can't really find it on the go right now. I just had a thought, because later we have this, it really jumps ahead, we have this flashback, no, it's not a flashback, it's the recording, what happened to the people, or the crew, the former crew of the Horizon. And I had to think, like how they're, tearing their flesh and everything. There is a picture of Hercules, like he's eating
the famous one. What's it called?
I don't know. A hand. I think at one point Hercules is. Isn't
it Zeus?
I think he is. No, he's eating his children.
Isn't that Zeus? Are you sure? Because I know show the image here. Like I think we know it's a famous painting, but I know what you mean. It's the same like grotesque, sort of disgusting imagery.
Yeah.
Exactly, and this is the image I had in mind where suddenly when from the blood and everything, I was going to this scene, because that's kind of feels like an authentic relation there. I'm sorry, I didn't find it at this moment. Maybe
we will get it.
We will never forgive you.
I mean, we will get into this more when we talk about the horror proper, but I find like these little glimpses where they showcase us like what happened to the crew as well, really, really interesting, and also like one of the pieces where I feel like more could have been done, because in these small glimpses it feels like the effects of what happened to the Event Horizon were a little bit more specific than what we later see manifest in the crew that we are with now. So that would be interesting to decipher. I feel like one could spend a lot of time like going through all of these little glimpses and like deconstructing them.
One thing
And especially they give so much to they would, especially this ritual hell thing they are trying to write here. If they put more into this, the whole movie would have been totally different. Oh, I can't
Yes.
speak anymore.
Absolutely.
Especially this eyes taken out. I mean, eyes symbolizes the soul. If you take them out, the person no longer has a soul. So we have this perfectly integrated there.
That's
But
interesting.
there's
Where is such a symbolism? Is it like in Greek, Roman, as we're talking, or?
it's all through literature. Eyes symbolize the soul. Like the eyes are the mirror of your soul.
Oh, like this. Okay, I can see it
And
now.
therefore, if they would take them out, you take out the
Oh.
soul, which therefore you have this oh, I'm so sorry. Where you have to have this translation here. You have I think it's the former captain you see in the
Yeah.
backlash who's holding his eye like that, and you have Dr. Weir who is getting his
Taking them
eyes
out.
scratched out by himself, and then transforming into this demon-like state.
Yeah, the brown hair lady dies and her eyes turn black. It's very similar.
Exactly. There's so much good basic information there that if you just pushed it a bit farther, this movie would have been totally different and much better.
And this is like a good point because this just brings us into the horror in this film is like undecided. Because for example, if they went like there is Latin, you pointed that out, that we get like the first distress call is Latin, but later it's explained that it's Latin because the captain spoke like he liked using Latin phrases.
Yeah.
And this kind of takes away from like the occult demon horror. It more like it's still, it wouldn't have to be bad, but the implication would be more like that there's some alien, the evil force that is using whatever there was in human psyche for themselves, which wouldn't be bad. But on the other hand, like you come to this film and you're expecting Satan, right? You wanna see poltergeist, right? Like the sort of what everything like seems to aim towards.
Maybe we can
Yeah,
even start.
I think that was his the way of the production team to get away again from all this ritual stuff and
Yes.
to relativate it and to make it more realistic. Though I think that
okay,
approach is
Maybe we can even start deconstructing this a little bit, because we know from the production side that this movie, like many of them are, is sort of an amalgamation of many different ideas. And for example, one of the ideas very early on in the script was that the Event Horizon was attacked by aliens, like tentacle-wielding aliens.
From
in some way.
like a similar idea from another dimension.
From another dimension.
From FTL.
But I look at this film and, for example, if I see the final confrontation is basically a fist fight, this makes no sense if we are dealing with demons from hell. But if it's like physical aliens that abducted people, maybe there's more sense. And like years ago, we watched a very like early 50s or a 60s like film, like Plan 6 Vampires from Space.
No, that's a famous one. That's Plan 8 from Outer Space.
Plan
That's
8 from Outer Space.
Extremely famous one.
Which is like this completely incoherent mess. And it is that because essentially the guy behind it wanted to make like 3 different movies, couldn't do it, and just spliced the scenes together.
Yes, so-
like straight up, like you have a vampire movie and an alien invasion movie, and they're just spliced together. Obviously, this example of Event Horizon isn't as extreme, but I feel like you could like deconstruct this film and see, okay, there is a complete idea of how the horror would work as occult. There's a complete idea how this horror would work as aliens. There's a complete idea of how this horror would work as character drama, and all of these kind of intersect in certain points.
Yeah, kind of. And I think can this just lead us to the point that, oh my god, the horror demon aspect just was really stupid.
I think it's about that time that we can get into this.
So, spoilers, Dr. Reed turns out like he got taken over by demons or whatever, we are still not sure, and he becomes extremely an extreme threat, and he mostly punches people and like throws them around. That's the scary thing of the like.
The one time he uses a gun or a gun-like instrument, he accidentally kills himself. Actually.
Yes.
It's just very unfortunate.
because like we get like we mentioned that Doctor Weird, Doctor whatever his name is, Robin Hood has like this story.
I like Dr. Weird.
It fits.
Let's call him that. Okay, so Doctor Weird has this history with his wife that like committed suicide. It turns out in the film. Then we have the brown hair lady has like this kind of heavy-handed story about like portrayal that she has a disabled son that she has issues communicating with, and then Lawrence Fishburne has this also just like kind of a little bit ham-fisted element that he lost a crewman in the fire long ago, and it sort of haunts him. And the quality of these various aspects is varied. We can talk about that in a moment, but the primary thing is that there's a part of the horror in the film that uses these aspects. There's like the characters are facing hallucinations. Characters are hearing voices of the people they lost in their stories. One character dies because she gets basically seduced by this hallucination of her son, who is like, you know, just always out of reach, and eventually this leads her to a literal fall, which is that's I like that. That's how this sort of evil force, I feel, should work. It should like toy around on human psyche. But then at the climax of the film, Dr. Reeds gouges his eyes out, and it becomes basically just
Magical.
a very strong magical guy, and he just punches people, and then he gets defeated because Lawrence Fishburne slams him in the face with a pipe, which is very good.
Though, on the other hand, they didn't really go through with this mind place. I mean, we don't know the other woman. There's basically nothing about her. She just survives. We don't know how. We don't know what her backstory is.
Most of these other characters, notice, had like just quirks, right?
Yeah, we have Cooper, who is fixing the other ship, and he's basically out of the horizon the most of the time, just like I think Smitty or something was the other guy's name, and there for some reason they don't have some psych games going on there as well.
It's amazing because like these two characters are kind of like our favorite, because when you think about it, these two guys, they're out there fixing the ship the entire film. They have no idea about anything that's happening inside.
We actually joked about this, like, what if at the very end of the movie the second rescue team comes and they get like Cooper out of the grav pod and ask him what happened. And like, Cooper cannot tell them anything. He's just like, well, we docked with the ship. Our ship got damaged. I spent the next 20 hours outside in my spacesuit fixing it up. Then things exploded for some reason. I managed to like jetpack myself to the ship, and then I got into the pod and got rescued. He has no idea about all the supernatural things seemingly happening, because we never really get to see this from his perspective. So it's really weird.
And I think most of the time it's the horror is not something creeping where you await something scary to happen. I think it's more like Saw, where you have watch one creepy, horrible death after another, where I got to the point of thinking, this Smitty guy had the best death ever of the group, because it was quick and probably didn't even notice he was dead when it happened, because it was the explosion.
He was so sad. Like, I legitimately felt bad when he looks at this bomb and realizes he's going to die. And that made me actually sad. That's like, oh.
That was, but I think you're completely right that it becomes almost this Saw thing, which I think is a shame, because it feels like this is where the horror is standing in its own way in some places. Because this mind angle that you mentioned, I feel like could be really cool. Like for Dr. Weir to have this moment of like reliving this vision of his wife killing herself.
There is a scene that we basically it's a flashback to events that he didn't see, and he's there trying to convince his wife to not kill herself. And
the entire way through, she doesn't react to him because he wasn't there. Yeah. It's just his vision of that, and this in and of itself is like a really interesting representation of why this would be so devastating to him, why this would be something that drives him like over the edge. But then the movie is like, yeah, but this isn't enough. So now we have her screaming at you and she opens her eyes and it's this body horror aspect of she has gouged out her eyes. And in this context, it loses like all the symbolism and it kind of undercuts what was there before.
Yeah, and just what we already talked how the movie likes its gore. It
Yeah.
likes its really like I consider this to be really tacky and cheesy, and I also consider this. I believe that it is so unnecessary. If the movie was just this more psychological, hallucinogenic aspect, it could be actually kind of it could be actually legitimately creepy. Because honestly, most of these really gory, bloody body horror scenes are just out of place. And this brings me to what we've been already discussing with Dr. Weird, because that we do not understand what type of character he is, because we see him relieve this scene, and this should be this moment in the story where he, as our protagonist, has to face this and overcome this, and then he should be the one who sort of gets this catharsis to some level resolution to his past, and then maybe manages to save the day or something. But instead, he becomes a space zombie.
And I mean, you could go the other way, that he's completely devastated with the experience of his wife killing herself. But also for this, it doesn't feel appropriate the way it's done, because it doesn't feel like he's angry, like he's sad, like he's feeling guilty of what has happened to his wife.
He's just some
And
creepy
there I have to-
weirdo.
Yeah, and there I have to chime in again. And really, does the woman have to be sort of naked? I mean, she's just
So
wearing pants, which
obnoxious.
is obviously this typical US stuff, because I'm sure I'm sure if it's some other country, like, I don't know, Germany would have put a completely naked woman there if she had to be
Probably.
naked. Yeah.
But
On the other hand, you could have put her on, gave her dress, because if you get in the bathtub to cut your wrists to die, you give a fuck about what you're wearing.
And honestly, I feel like this nudity is so just tacky and unnecessary there. I feel like, because it's not you can tell it's not there meant to be titillating or something. It's there to be just add to the edgy factor of it's the same with body horror. It's just there to just be there.
It's
as a shock.
horror and especially death and naked, especially women, have some sort of history. If you watch horror movies up to a certain point, it's usually the couple who has sex who dies. It's the female woman, like the one with the makeup and wearing the skirt and the high heels, that is dying rather quickly. It's the one who is
Well, I mean, admittedly,
stupid that is dying.
You're talking here about these most obnoxious, terrible tropes of these 70s, 80s slashers,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah,
every
but-
movie is basically the same.
The problem is that it's still going on. You still have this tropes covered up a bit better, but it's still most of the time that these kind of women appear there. And I mean, the woman who survives in this movie is the one of the most empty ones, because she doesn't have a background story. She basically, we just have her name. Okay, she is obviously not stupid because the technical stuff she's doing.
I mean,
But
I feel like there's no point in focusing on the woman aspect. There's half of the crew that has no personality or story or quirks. We remember Cooper not because of what he was like, but what happened to him in the film, because he flew into space and then somehow survived and shit. We remember the engineer guy because he had he got blown up, but not he didn't really do anything. And the young guy that gets sucked into the portal, literally we know nothing about him. His role in the story is just to be the first victim. So I feel like...
I have to admit, with Cooper, I think his personality still stuck with me more than the way he died because no, he's not dying. The supposed or almost death, because it's this yeah, cliche character he's representing. This man, I can't really do this, but it's like, I don't know.
He does
it's,
get like the most one-liners, I feel like.
He's like
Yeah,
90s in one person, admittedly.
Yeah.
That's this era of like dialogue.
I honestly, yeah, it's kind of the way he talks and everything. It's yeah, that's why it's stuck with, or his character is stuck with me, because it's such a cliche representation within him again.
But like the thing about it is like you look at Cooper, and I feel like the reason he gets stuck with us is the actor was given as little and then did as much as he could, and he honestly made a very entertaining character with, like, you know, he's like, oh shit, I'm in space now, and things like this. I feel like the actor gave his best with so little.
Yeah, well, it feels like he has some sort of personality apart of the others.
I mean,
The
the other
others
guy
are-
is Irish. That's his personality.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
but it's like they don't have, or at least they don't have traits portrayed in a way to stand out, to make them a character.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just they hit out their lines, and
I mean,
that's sort of it.
I mean, this is why, like, you're watching the introduction of this crew where most people have no personality, and you assume most of them will die relatively quickly, like in Alien, for example. But then that's not what happens. Like, actually, like, two survive that are ones of these seemingly disposable ones, right? So I feel like, once again, there's some... I mean, maybe it was meant to be like a twist on the formula on purpose.
We are far enough into the 90s that I could actually imagine that they're like trying to be like, you know what would be a cool subversion of this? The guy that got blown up into space actually like makes a return and comes back.
That's just... It was such a kind of goofy moment suddenly in this, like, otherwise serious sort of climax where, you know, we see this, like, more or less trying to treat, well, realistically the space, and then one of the characters gets blown up by a bomb into orbit and then just uses his, like, jetpack to return back, and he survives, and then he even survives getting shot with a nail gun.
It's this thing where, and I mean, this is the point where I feel like it starts feeling intentional, because Cooper returns and throws off like the entire plot of the movie. Like, literally, the bad guy is there, he has the gun, he has like completely the upper hand over everyone, and then suddenly somebody knocks on the window from the outside of the spaceship. He just turns around, shoots it, gets killed in the process, and suddenly we have more survivors than we expected. And this is like where I feel like at some point the screenwriter must have looked at this and be like, yeah, that would just be funny to include here.
Yeah, though I have to say I'm with Alien 2 again, because it's at least in the beginning, where the lines that were dropped there by the military people.
Oh, yes.
They were I loved them. I think that's the reason I watched this movie so often, because they're good, they're funny, and this kind of feels again like this, just that they did
I
it
could
more
have
to-
totally
towards the
seen
end.
like Cooper flying into space. Game over, man! Game over!
But you see, I feel like this is the difference, because the Marines in Aliens, we see them having like this over-the-top goofy personas like a bunch of adrenaline junkies would have, with like a very good rapport between each other. But then as the movie progresses and they get into extremely stressful situations, these lines stop being funny. These lines start being desperate, and I feel like that's one of the stronger aspects of the personalities in Aliens. I like that you feel that these people are constantly on edge, but they're still moving through. And here, Cooper just flies back, and he doesn't know that there's any threat technically. Like, he's still just like,
Yeah, it doesn't have like a strong progression here because it's not consistent enough in showing what he's doing.
okay, but I feel like we've been stuck on this absolute side character for a bit too long. So maybe
No,
let's.
we can bring it back because we talked about why the reliving the death of his wife for Dr. Weird doesn't really work that way, because
Oh yeah.
we don't really get this feeling that this affects him in the long run. And I think the flip side of this is, I think, at least my favorite of the serious scenes in quotes, and
Yes.
probably one of yours as well, where we see the same happening to the Captain Miller, and for him it's actually like, yeah, this reliving, and for him it's not even as literal. We don't see him actually getting the flashback, but he gets like these visions of a bosun, I think, a guy that he served with like a while ago who died in a fire aboard a spaceship. And this really, really rattles him. And we see the vision end. And the first thing he does is he sits down with a friend who he never talked about this. And they have like this long, very calm heart to heart, just talking this through and kind of dealing with this vision. And there it feels much more like he's having like an actual like consequence from this mental strain.
It's this 3-minute long, just calm, serious scene, and we learn so much about actually both characters.
Yeah.
We learn that they're good friends. We learn in a very natural way. We learn that the captain is so cold and calculated and stalwart that this is the thing that makes him slowly believe that this ship is cursed and just insane, right? Like that's how much was required for him to finally start breaking.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite scene, I think, in this.
And I mean, it especially gets the weight because he says himself, I never talk to anyone about this. This ship knows my deepest, darkest secrets.
Yes.
Where we would be with this ritual stuff again. It would fit so perfectly, but then they went off in a complete different direction.
Yes.
Yeah, honestly, we talked briefly, like, in the beginning characters are like, no, if you have hallucinations, it's too much carbon dioxide in the air. And we talked briefly about the funny concept that you could make in a film like this completely based just on the psychology and human people getting hallucinations and having to deal with this. But honestly, that's not necessary. But if the film just focused more on this occult aspect of just getting into our minds and like pulling things from these people's pasts, and that would be the horror. Like, it's annoying because the first crew, we see that they weren't killed by a silly demon man. They went insane.
And this is
Yes.
this is where you could even like make the literature a reference to Dante's Inferno, right? Like one of the big conceits there is that you keep meeting these characters who have like some kind of ironic twist on their life as part of their hellish punishment, essentially, of their experience there. And in the few glimpses of the first crew that we see, it felt like, to me, it felt like it was going in this direction, because we see this crew didn't like start just murdering each other. We see like a pair having sex in the background. We see the guy like injuring himself. We see like these ritual things where it feels like for each of these characters you could understand what their backstory was like, what kind of tensions they brought with them on board of the vessel that were just like twisted and exaggerated. And if this was the idea, I could see that being like a really interesting idea.
Maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself there, but maybe you could even put it down to the 7 deadly sins there, that each of them would have his own
Oh my
sin.
god.
That would be a really cool way
Don't
to
we have
deal.
like 7 characters? Captain, 2 ladies, 2 engineers, the young engineer, the doctor, and I think I'm missing someone. But or is it 7? Because if it's perfectly 7, then that would be
It
awesome.
could easily work at least into this.
That could be such an interesting
You could
premise.
totally run this whole movie on these kind of things. Why didn't you?
Which would aid it also massively, because then you could immediately have this idea, all of these characters fall into these quirks and tropes that you start out with, and then how does this relate to one of the 7 deadly sins, and then just spin it from there.
God, you can do such interesting things, like the young guy that gets indoctrinated by this dimensional gate. He is like gluttony, and the way gluttony is showcased is that he just wants to like be influenced by this thing. He just gets obsessed with this thing. He wants to consume and be consumed by it. Like, for example, and maybe it reflects on his past somehow, and so on. But instead, we get a big demon man.
Yeah, this is where there is clearly like the framework for something really, really cool there. It's the perfect example for how this movie kind of undercuts itself. We have this like beautiful 3-minute scene, really good introspective with our captain, and then the next time we see this set, it's, oh no, the demons have turned the water tank into bloods, which is kind of like And even like when she stands in front of it and the glass bursts and she's like freaking out, but it's like, okay, there's like 100 liters of blood just like in you. It's gross, but like this isn't a threat or anything.
It's not even pure blood. It's blood mixed with water.
Yeah, so it's just kind of this.
I don't know. I'm sorry, but I don't think that any kind of sickness you could get through this would be relevant in this situation.
No,
It's just, but it's also just so cheap. It's the trick of like, oh, there's just out of nowhere 100 liters of blood, and that was like the thing where we were discussing how the evil force in this film that is apparently the living, breathing ship. It has no rules. It can do anything like the writers want, and that's the problem, because it's not like this is an omnipotent force. It's just that whatever writers come up with will happen. Like one moment there can be hallucinations that make people go insane, another moment the big evil demon man can only like get hit with a pipe in the face and he can't do anything else about it. He can only like punch back.
And the powers that the demon man, like demon possessed Dr. Vegas, are so weirdly specific only to allow for like some really tacky tropes. Like we have this, he killed somebody who was like about to actually go in the fight of him, and then he has the magical superpower within like 30 seconds to like vivisect him and like spread him out and like elaborately hang him from the ceiling, which is, it's a really cool display of body horror, honestly. Yes, it is.
He was pretty fast at it. He's pretty good.
Yeah, it's just like, it needs him to have basically the superpower of moving as fast as the Flash, and it's utilized for nothing. And the next one is like, our captain laid his weapon down for like 1 second, and our character, like, the demon man has the power of like magically, blindly, extremely silently, and throwing no shadow, like, steal this gun away, but don't do anything else, so he can like smugly have it on his lap when he's like turning around in his captain's chair.
You can tell it was like the writers just coming up probably with stuff on the fly.
Yeah,
we're like, okay, so Morpheus gets a gun. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. But then they're like, oh wait, we have to remember first that this lady exists. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then they're like, you know what? Maybe the gun is too much. Okay, he puts down the gun and it's gone. And then like, okay, but where did it go? Oh, they're in the chair. Somehow Lawrence Fishburne never noticed it. The demon guy is there and he has the gun. It's just, it's just.
Just out of curiosity, was the writer grown up or some, I don't know, 14-year-old kid?
We looked
like this.
We looked at the director. So the director for this film is.
He's also part of the writing team. Actually.
Oh my god!
He's a director-writer on basically everything.
Because
that he
he's
does.
the man behind such incredible classics like Mortal Kombat, the film, and what else was
Resident Evil, the films, all the bad ones. And
So that
it's like
explains a lot.
it's like this complete career of these kind of schlocky movies, which, you know, they have a charm unto themselves, but definitely like not the strong suit in like compelling dramatic conclusions.
I have to chime in there. I like the first Resident Evil.
Did you
Oh,
see?
that isn't terrible. No, but this is like Resident Evil, like 12. It's an underground Russian base, and there's like a full-scale like rebuilding of New York, so we can have a zombie outbreak there again.
I think we call it. I mean, basically, because what these films are, they're popcorn flicks. They're like you turn it on when you're drinking beer with your friends and so on. But the problem is that Event Horizon tried to be this serious horror story, I feel. And you know, they tried really to create some deeper atmosphere. They tried to do their own Giger, their own idea of hell in space and so on. But then just it constantly gets undercut by this cheekiness. And I feel, you know, the best scene in the film, which is how does the great demon get defeated? Is it a ritual that the protagonists have to do? Is it like some ancient curse they have to break, or do the protagonists just are lost and the evil force prevail? No, it's C4. It's just fucking detonator.
I mean, in general, it's this thing where like the most devastating things that happen in this movie have like fairly mundane reasons, you know. The Lewis and Clark ultimately doesn't get destroyed by some by demonic power. It's because the demon guy stole a packet of C4 and smuggled it aboard the ship. and the demon guy that gets defeated because Crawford did the same with him at the end.
C4 is the most powerful thing in this universe.
Yeah, like-
no, but like the idea that Doctor Weird is like overtaken and destroys Lewis and Clark could be cool if we were still dealing with this psychological horror, right?
It's just, after we are at some point like dealing with the demon guy with Dr. Weir, who got blown out into space, and then magic forces brought him back, rebuilt his body, infused with like runes that resemble somewhat the core of the ship and stuff, which is all really cool. But then he has gotten no superpowers beyond that anymore. It can be punched to death with a pipe.
He can get teleported back to the ship, but then he can't. He basically can we just like the scene where Lawrence Fishburne blows up the ship, like it. I wish there was like a cheesy one-liner. I wish he said like "go to hell" or something like that.
Go back to hell.
Go back to hell.
I mean, this where Dr. Weir is magically brought back. Even if you would have gone there and let him resurface slowly from some pond with some a bit of sticky fluid like that, even that would have been more convincing than what they did, because then you could have argued in your head, oh, he's part of the ship and therefore was reinstated there. But since it's just I'm there, like I don't know, like the rabbit out of the hat.
And like there is this theme that they keep constantly talking how apparently the ship is alive and it wants to kill them, but nothing shows this. Like the ship is not alive, the ship is not trying to kill them. It's Dr. Weir who has magic demon powers and then random hallucinations. Like there is like he doesn't feel like part of the ship. He just feels like a guy always, like a demon guy.
I mean, you could have like, I don't know, doors that magically open and close themselves suddenly. I mean, the only thing that's sort of happening on its own is the light going on and off.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's
which it's a ship in this condition. It's like
yes. But it's like you can tell that maybe they were thinking about doing like doors thing, because all the doors have like spikes on them and shit. And like I was just waiting for someone to get blended in that corridor of grinders or something.
Once again, it's this thing where like the entire room looks like it's so much designed to be evil. Like these walls of spikes look like they should be closing in. This like giant orb looks like the black should be starting oozing out of it and consuming everything. It looks like a giant meat grinder and stuff. But then and the climax of the movie is set in this beautiful room, but then they decide, no, we have a different idea now. It's our demon bad guy. Oh, what? He already died. No, we bring him back for this cool idea that we have.
This ending should have been, if you want to make it like this, like serious psychological horror, like it should have been that it's like, for example, Lawrence Fishburne or some other like individual character who is facing only like his past, like their past, whoever that would be. Like there's only like he's struggling against visions of for example, this could be Dr. Weir struggling against visions of his wife and so on. But in the end, like the ship is meant to be like an evil demon spaceship, but it's the spaceship's feature that is defeated, which is a pre-made detonations thing.
And it's also like, to jump back a little bit, we see also this thing, the ship is alive and is the ultimate evil force and just puppeteering the Dr. Weir and stuff. But if we are to believe this, it's then like very silly that he like still needs to press the button and has like the touchscreen that says, do you want to open the gateway into hell in like 10 minutes or 20 minutes
Yes.
next? And he just has to choose. It's like these little details where it's just a little bit.
I mean, once again, that would work completely if this was only like psychological, like
like,
influences by evil forces.
It's this thing, like none of these individual elements can't work. It's just putting them together in this specific way that's just kind of
It's just like
odd. It starts contradicting itself and like taking away from the idea.
I think that's the entire occult aspect. We talked about the ending to the film.
Yeah, the ass end of the ship is blown up. Now the last thing we can talk about is the front end, where honestly I would have liked to have seen an aftermath scene of our two like unlikely survivors. I think both characters that we didn't expect being like still alive in the end.
Remember 3?
Oh yeah, 3. But the last 2 that are like, still conscious, like looking out and seeing what happened, because we cut immediately to the latest rescue operation.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
feel like...
first we get a cheap jump scare of, oh no, it's actually Dr. Weird is probably still alive, and his demonic forces are still probably there. Yeah, but then the movie just ends, sort of. And the movie just ends, and the tense horror atmosphere is immediately struck with the epic, like, 90s electro
soundtrack kicking in with the credits. I mean...
It's important that there is written the end. Because otherwise you wouldn't have gotten that now the movie is at its
The
end.
90s audience would not understand.
The only thing that I waited for was like a question mark appearing, like a sequel bait. Was the ship really alive still? Like, can they still take everything over? Yeah.
But honestly, that would have been better than what they did.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the odd thing is also like, I mean, you know, I don't want to ruin everything by jumping back into world building, but this part of the ship now gets rescued by like a much more professional rescue team and like specialized armor and everything.
Where were these guys?
Yes, exactly. Where were they all along?
You'd think there would be, like, if this is a secret government project, there would be like a lot of professionals probably knowing about this.
It's like, oh my gosh, we have this emergency message. We have to send someone. We don't have the money. I have some people lying around.
It does feel like
we could send them.
the first time around, the Event Horizon has appeared again. Okay, is there like somebody cheap that we can get?
It's the end of the tax year. Let's like send one last remnant so we get like our tax breaks.
And only when that didn't work, they say, everything blew up, but a piece of the Event Horizon is still around. Well, I guess we'll have to send in the professionals. There is no choice, and then they do that.
It's just a story about a very corrupt government. That's what it actually is.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any like other topics, or should we just summarize the entire thing? Because I feel like...
I think we're due for a summary, because, like... I mean...
This is a very entertaining film.
It is a very entertaining film.
We were watching and we were constantly just talking about everything in this film. It's never boring, I'd say.
It's never boring, and I think for me, like, a very big part of that is that it's full of tropes, it's full of contradictions, but I wouldn't necessarily call it super predictable, because there's every so often things, like I
Cooper.
am genuinely every time surprised Cooper survives, I'm genuinely every time surprised that Justin survives, like, that they actually managed to do that and stuff. And for all the, like, schlockiness that it has, I also feel like every so often there are moments where I cannot, like, none of these characters are very well developed, but I still, like, want them to succeed. Like, just the fact that they, like, with Justin have this thing, the dumbass just fucking touched the portal to hell and now he's getting sucked in, so there's no question we pull him out of there. And they try to help him. They try to constantly, like, keep him in sickbay. When he wakes up in sickbay, like, everybody literally, like, drops everything else and tries to help him. And they run into this issue of him, like, being possessed and going into the airlock and opening the airlock, and there's no question. Okay, we just catch him and pull him back in.
And they managed to save him.
And they managed to do this. And it's just like, from this alone, I know nothing about Justin. But I'm so glad that he survives in the end, because honestly, like, he's gone through hell quite literally, and it's like so nice to see that everybody pulled together and like managed to do this for him. So
also, if we talk about Justin, if I just chime in quickly, the thing in the beginning where he reaches out to touch the dimensional gate, even that you could explain if the film, if like he was like, you know, if these were already evil forces like influencing him, if there was like he also, like, I feel needed like some voice from the past calling him, right?
And it's one of
and
those
not just
things,
being a moron.
multiple times in this film we get this imagery of like getting a real close-up of somebody's eye, and like there is this moment where the core aligns itself and the lights shine directly into somebody's eyes, and this is like the moment they get overtaken.
I mean, yeah, that's
if
how
this had been
Dr. Weir becomes evil.
Exactly. If this had been more consistent and like showcased for Justin, for example, in the beginning, that would have been really cool.
But like why didn't this evil gateway do that to everyone? Because everyone was in the
Who
control
knows?
room.
Who knows? It's finicky.
Once
It's a
again.
poltergeist.
Well, I guess one could say the basic ideas were really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Problem, they just didn't go through it all, and yeah, like mixed up too much different things, and it feels like they were not really sure what kind of story they wanted to tell. Like they some kind of started with a few ideas and then wrote it along the way, but didn't revise it to make it more round and wholesome as a story.
And I think this is a very nice way of describing it, because yeah, all this needed were like a few more revisions to like hone in, and from the production side that we talked about in the beginning, we know there just wasn't time with that. And for me, this is also what makes this entire thing like so sympathetic to watch, because it still feels like everybody like tried their genuine best. Like all the performances feel like these people are like really into this movie and trying to do the best with their role. And there's this idea that like all the ideas are really cool. I can see like why all of them got thrown around, and then it just like doesn't stick the landing because it didn't manage to like get through enough of a production cycle to really iron out all these creases.
Maybe it was just me, but for me, Kevin Costner as Dr. Weir felt odd. I don't know if it's just because of the roles I usually know him play, but I don't know. Didn't really.
I wonder, maybe there was. We could like try and research like the casting for this film, because the casting is obviously high quality. You have Lawrence Fishburne, you have Kevin Costner, as I learned because I didn't recognize him at all, and so maybe they were originally signed up for different roles. Maybe Kevin Costner was meant to be the captain, for example. Like maybe that's how this works,
Yeah.
right? Because you're right, he's kind of off, and maybe that's on purpose. Maybe that's meant for him to be, this kind of a little bit creepy guy. Like, that's why.
Or maybe he just can't act that way. I don't know.
It also feels to me like out of all people, his character was also the one that I had the most like trouble seeing any consistency in, because he has like, we already talked about this, he has like coming in and out of these visions, sometimes losing complete control, sometimes he doesn't. When he first goes into this room, he seems genuinely like horrified that our first woman has died there, fallen to her death, but then he gets overtaken again, and it's just like
He's like supposed to be this like calculated, reasonable scientist, but then he's very emotional. But then he's a creepy like guy who thinks only about his wife. But then he's this suddenly this compassionate person. He's very unfocused, and I think that's why we like Lawrence Fishburne so much in this.
yeah, he's
Captain Miller
much more consistent
is just
there.
very consistent.
I mean,
I think the character Dr. Weir, they were trying to implement too much different kind of persons in there.
yes.
It's that's why he doesn't feel convincing to me. I have to think of the book Erebos from Ursula Poznanski, where the main character, the protagonist, a teen guy, he is good at school. He has a lot of friends. He is doing sports. He is gaming. Quite good, actually. And when you list this, you realize, what?
Some of these
How
don't.
does he not sleep? Does he not eat? It doesn't fit because there's too much attributes contributed to him that you just no that such a person can't exist, at least not as a human being.
Yeah,
And this feels here quite the same.
it's also the problem that this is a film with very limited runtime, because maybe this character would make sense in a TV show, in a book series,
Yeah.
but in such a short period, it just like doesn't feel at all.
I'll take the opportunity once again to make like a reference to Pandorum, where you have like the ultimate bad guy there, who is like this older officer of the crew, and we learn about him that he's like somebody who woke up in a previous cycle and spent like years like basically as the self-proclaimed king of the ship, and like waking people up from their sleep and manipulating and using them, and then he spends the entire time like in the movie trying to play a completely sane person, and he starts out as that, and that portrayal like slowly breaks down. which is a much, much more simple thing. Like, this is just one progression that he goes on. Whereas with our character, Dr. Weir, he has, like, many ups and downs in there. And I feel like this is where it kind of falls, where if you had, like, this more simple version where you can have, like, this one mask and this one real version, and they just slowly merge into each other, within the scope of one movie, that's much, much easier, and probably what I would feel would have been realistic to achieve here.
Yeah, or maybe fewer characters. Maybe like if this was more a character-driven film. And this immediately reminds me, speaking of contradictions, I know that I forgot one character on the team when I was counting them.
Yeah.
There's this guy who's the doctor, who's the actual like medical guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just there, mostly. The one scene he gets is when it turns out he's the best friend with the captain. But he's just this guy that has almost like, he's just seemingly just serious, and then he gets this one random scene, maybe you remember, where he like puts a razor to a guy's throat and then is horrified at this himself, and it's just so out of nowhere and it's never brought upon again.
It is this, and like in the beginning he's introduced as the loner of the group.
Yeah.
Then he has this moment like suddenly threatening somebody. A few scenes later, he's the perfect person to calm the girl down when she like runs onto the bridge after hearing the banging. And he just grabs her and like talks her down immediately. And it works. And it's like this dichotomy.
He is a friend of the captain.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like these two sides of him, like, where does this come from? Like, why does the captain, who considers him his best friend, introduce him as, like, the gloomy guy in the corner that nobody talks to?
And I feel now that in hindsight kind of explains that maybe this was supposed to be like an in-joke that they are actually good friends.
Maybe.
But there feels like there's an actually interesting character down there.
Yeah.
But just not in this film, because we see only like 3 times any scenes with him.
I like the how you phrased that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just this entire film is schizophrenic, but I feel like that's what makes it so entertaining. If it wasn't as wild, I feel like it would have this the risk of just being a forgettable pile of stinking ash, right? Like, I feel like if they tried making a serious horror film, these guys would probably fail at it. Like, they would probably not do a good film. And here we get a film that is just... It makes us talk about it for like 2 hours or something right now, right?
I mean, it's this thing where I watch it and I have absolutely no issue seeing why this would become a cult classic. Like, on one hand, I completely understand that this was commercially and critically an absolute failure. Because, yeah, of course it was. Like, this is not the blockbuster they were hoping for. But at the same time, yeah, it gets you talking. You want to engage with it more because all of the ideas are kind of cool. And, you know...
You want to watch this film with friends and to keep talking through it, right?
And we talked about this briefly, and it's like even part of the Wikipedia article at this point, which actually surprised me, that part of the reason this thing is a blockbuster is because, you know, there is this massive fan base of Warhammer that is like trying to integrate it into the larger canon of a completely different franchise, and it's just like, yeah, of course you would do that, because this film feels like it's kind of looking for a home. It's kind of like, if you could just like give more context to it all, it would work. And yeah, it's in this weird spot where it can't stand on its own, but you kind of want it to.
It like
So Event Horizon up for adoption?
Yes.
Your forms now?
Maybe Captain Miller for adoption.
Captain Miller for adoption. I think that is a pretty good summary of our thoughts there.
Thank you for inviting me to the podcast.
Very gladly.
This was very good. And just... I'm sorry I've been coughing the entire thing, because I've been feeling sort of a little bit bad.
I've noticed.
And like, oh god, oh god, oh
no. What a wild creature! Excellent.
Well, that was our one-time host.
Yeah, I think we will have to get Layla back at the end, don't we?
I guess. Well, for the rest of you who listened to all of this, we hope you had fun. Some sort of. And, well, if you like us, share us. And everything else on every platform there is out there, we would be more than happy. Do you have anything left to say, Alex?
No, only that we are going to be here next week in some capacity, some dead, some not, and this is still running around, and we will be where you can always find us.
Until next time.